it's Cyndi, and this month we are doing Pablo Picasso, and it feels like I haven't made a video in weeks because I haven't made a video in weeks. Anyway, Picasso, he's one of the few artists that we're doing that actually made a really good living while he was alive. He died a very wealthy man. I think they said he was worth like, excuse me, $500 million when he passed away, which would be like, I think that was in the 70s. No, be like $1 billion now, but, or more. But I've lost my little book, the book that inspired this whole inspiration from the Greats video thingy. I can't find my book, so I can't find little interesting tidbits about him, except that I have watched a lot of videos. But what I'm going to do today, he was considered the co-founder of Cubism. George Braque and Pablo Picasso were the cubist of the times, and they named it Cubism because Picasso really liked Paul Cézanne and loved his landscapes, and Picasso was doing some, but he was doing them in a much different way, and somebody said that the houses didn't look like houses, they looked like little cubes, and they started calling the whole movement Cubism. But now he also, painted, he was also into surrealism, and he was a sculptor and a printer and a stage designer and all kinds of things. But I'm going to try to do a cubist piece. And I was watching videos, and what people usually do when they're first trying to learn how to do this, and what Picasso did, you take a couple objects, just everyday type objects, choose one or two, and create from that. And a lot of people use vases. Picasso did vases, but he also did guitars, and then he moved on to doing women. But I thought, my first instinct, I was going to, do vases, and then I thought, no, let's do something more interesting. So I'm going to do something that I really like, chickens. And if I had a printer that worked, I would have just printed out a picture of a chicken and reduced and enlarged and made the sizes that I wanted, but my printer doesn't work. So I was looking, I have these brass chickens. So I sort of looked at this brass chicken and drew a little chicken and cut it out. And then I made two other ones that are the same, but different sizes. So I'm going to start by placing these on here, and I'm going to draw chickens all over the place and then move to the next step. And of course, always being unprepared, I couldn't find any cardstock to cut out the chickens, so I just cut them out on regular paper, but hopefully it won't be too hard to trace around them. And this is a piece of Strathmore mixed media paper. But Picasso was born in the late 1800s, and I think he died in 73. Like I said, I don't have that book right in front of me, and I forgot to make notes as I was watching the videos. But he was a Spanish painter, and his father was a painter and an art teacher, a professor of art. So he was exposed to art at a very early age. I'm just using a regular graphite pencil. In fact, his mother claims that his first word was pencil, or the Spanish word for pencil. But he started taking formal art lessons, I think, when he was 7. And he was just really good, really early. He loved, sorry about that, my phone just rang. But as I was saying, he loved painting. So he went to art school. His family was like a regular middle-class family. And he had a sister that died when she was very young. I think she was like 5. So he had tragedy early on in life. But then when he became a young man, he moved to Paris, like they all did in the early 1900s. All of these painters moved to Paris. I think everyone that we've done so far this year, except for Jackson Pollock, lived in Paris at some point. But he moved there and, of course, became friends with a lot of the other artists at that time. Like I said, Paul Cézanne, Matisse. Matisse was a lot older than Picasso, but they became very similar because they also say that Picasso was the invented collage. He was the first one to start using collage. And Matisse used a lot of collage later in life. A lot of things that you look at by Matisse and you think are paintings are actually collage, because he lost his eyesight, and so it became much easier for him to cut up paper. But Picasso started doing collage because he would cut pieces out of the newspaper and add them to his art. He had a lot of women in his life, several children. I think he was married twice, but he had several long-term lovers. I think his first wife's name was Olga. And then he met this woman, Dora Maar, and they had a long love affair. And of course, all these women that he was involved with, he would paint them. So there are, you know, tons of paintings of each of his lovers and wives. And he had a painting sell in 2015 for $179.4 million. It's, I think, the 7th most expensive painting ever sold. That's a lot. But anyway, when the war started, he was having an affair with this Dora Maar, and he had a child with her. And I think he had a daughter, and I think she's still alive. I saw her in an interview. Of course, I don't know how old that interview was, but she looked like she was in her 60s in the interview. But the war started, and a lot of the artists left after the occupation because, you know, it was very dangerous. People were being killed, but he didn't leave. And, you know, his family And the people, you know, that loved him wanted to leave, but he just, he was not going to leave because he had too much going on. He had wives, he had lovers, he had kids, he had all these paintings. And so he said, we're going to stay, and they stayed, and, you know, it ended up okay, but it was a really terrible time, and his paintings during that time, of course, reflect the horrors of war. And he also met this very young painter. She was 21, Francois G-I-L-O-T. I think that's how you spell her name. Anyway, she was 21. He was like, I don't know, 60. And the other woman, Doris, knew that he was, you know, that he liked to get around, but she didn't really believe that he would leave her over this 21-year-old girl. But she was wrong. He did, and he never officially broke up with Dora. I think people say that, you know, he thought that he could just, you know, have a relationship with both of them. But she finally found out, and she had a nervous breakdown, and this all happened, you know, during the wartime. And her daughter said that during the war, when the Americans came, let's see, what do I need? Another little, let's see, is that size? Okay, so I'll do one this size up here. When the Americans came, and they had furlough in Paris, and the war was getting ready to end, they would always show up at Picasso's house, because the Americans wanted to see two things while they were in Paris. They wanted to see the Eiffel Tower and Picasso. And he would take them on tours of his studio. I thought that was pretty interesting. It's hard for me to talk while I'm tracing. I don't know how my chicken idea is going to turn out. I don't know. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to paint this, or I may use colored pencils. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. I've covered the whole page with chickens. Now I'm going to make lines everywhere. But I'm going to stop the video for a minute and think about this. I'll be right back. Okay, as you may notice, I decided the chickens needed to go off the page, so I added a few chickens, like, going off the page. Okay, so the next thing you do when you're doing a cubist painting is draw some lines. So I'm going to draw some lines, and I may end up erasing them in places, but I'm not really going to put a lot of thought into this. I'm just going to draw lines. One other interesting story about Picasso. Okay, first of all, his art is the most stolen art in the world. There are like 1,000 paintings still unaccounted for that were stolen from different places, his home, museums, wherever, people's houses, wherever. But the Mona Lisa was, I'm pretty sure it was in the Louvre, and it was stolen. And Picasso actually got called in for questioning on this, because a person that was a friend of his, and I'm not even going to try to say his name, but he was good friends with Picasso, and the cops came to that guy, and because they thought maybe he had stolen it, and he said no, that Pablo Picasso had stolen it. So the cops called Picasso in for questioning, but, you know, of course he did not steal it. And they ended up finding it, and it had been stolen by an Italian guy who worked at the Louvre and felt that the Mona Lisa needed to be in Italy, not in France. So they got it back, and all is well. But that's pretty funny that he was actually, they investigated him in an art thievery case. Okay, now the question is, how many lines do we do? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, let's do, got some going this way, but let me do another one this way. You know, it's funny, back before I really started doing art, I just messed around a lot. I doodled a lot. And I went through this little thing using markers, Sharpie markers, and I would doodle things and frame them. But what I was doing at that time was actually kind of cubism. I didn't know it, but that's what it was, because I would draw things, and then I would make lines all through it, and then I would color it all different colors. So it was kind of cubesque, I guess, and I didn't even know it. Speaking of coloring things in, I finished my my coloring book. I started drawing these girls with flowers all around them for a coloring book. I started it months ago, and I finished it, and then I was trying to self-publish it through the Amazon self-publishing program, but I was having a lot of problems getting it to download right. So I ended up just putting it on Etsy as a digital download. So if you feel the need to color, go to Etsy. It's called CeeCee's Flower Girls, and there's 21 illustrations, and I think they would be fun to color. I'm really not a colorer these days, but I did color the cover, and I did it with colored pencils. But anyway, it's on there. It's $5.99, and you can download it as many times as you want, and do whatever you want with it, except pretend that you drew it and sell it. I don't know. Okay, let's see. Do I need, maybe I'll do another line. In fact, I'll put a link to that coloring book down in the comments, because I would like to sell some. And then maybe another line here. And maybe, let's see, because I'm going to have all these smaller spaces in here. Right in here it seems like large spaces, but maybe that's what I need, are some large spaces. And if it looks too large, I could always make it smaller later. So, okay, there we have it. We have our chickens, we have our lines, and I think what I'm going to do next is go over all of my lines with a black Pigma Micron pen so that they stand out more, and then I'll start coloring them. And I'm not going to make you suffer through listening to me try to speak while I'm trying to trace lines, because that's not going to be it's not going to be good. So I'll be back when I've made all the lines black. Okay, have them all. You know what? I think I want one more line. I want one more line, doing something like this. That's not the pen I want. This is the pen I want. While I was, let's make it meet right there. While I was drawing these lines, I listened to more of the Picasso video. And we were at the stage in the video where he is, it's after the war and he is with Francois. But before I tell you about that, I'll tell you about what I'm going to use. I have decided to use my Prismacolor pencils. And I have tons of them out here. And I think I'm going to use like reds and browns, and then blues, and maybe some greens, and then maybe some yellow. I don't know. We may move into some other colors, but that's what I'm thinking right now. So let's start out maybe with, let's see what this one is. Tuscan Red. This one's sharper. Let's go with this. I have the regular and the very Vera Thin or Very Thin. I don't know how you pronounce it. Where are they? But see, this is a regular Prismacolor pencil, and this is the, I don't know if you can read that, but Vera Thin. And I like these. They're super hard, but you can get into tight corners with them. But let's see, where should we start? Let's just start right here. And I really should clean my glasses. And what I'm going to do first is just go over the entire space with the pencil, you know, fairly lightly, a light touch. Like this. Like that, and then darken it up, because we want these spaces to look a little dimensional. So we're going to sort of, you know, shade them to create depth in places in each little space that we color. And the wonderful thing about these pencils is at the end, I'm going to use a blender, and if you don't have a blender, you can just use a white pencil, a white Prismacolor pencil, and you go over it, and it really makes the pencil look like sort of sometimes almost like oil paint. But it makes it look, you know, not so much like you're coloring it with a pencil. It makes it look more like paint. So we'll do that at the end and see, you know, how it looks. And as you can see, this is going to take quite a while, so I'm not going to do this whole thing on camera because that would just be crazy. But back to Picasso. So it's right after the war, and he's living with Francois in the south of France. And at this point, he has become communist. He's joined the Communist Party because he's really into, you know, seeing the horrors of war and how fragile life is. He's really into living very simply, and you know, he's definitely a pacifist, and he's into, you know, people, sharing with people, and the whole communist thing at that time appealed to him. And what's funny is he was on the when he attempted to come to the United States at one point later on, years later, he had a difficult time because Herbert Hoover had put him on a watch list because he was communist, and because Herbert Hoover, not Herbert Hoover, what's his name? Hoover, the guy that was head of the FBI. Herbert Hoover, that's not right. But whatever. Hoover, the guy that was the nut case that was head of the FBI, that was just like super paranoid, and in fact he started the FBI, but he was a nutcase, and he had Picasso on a watch list. But so he's living there in the south of France, and they're living this, you know, nice, beautiful life, and they moved to a little town that's has always been famous for their pottery for decades, maybe centuries. They've been known for the pottery in this town, and he decides to start doing ceramics and sort of revives the town. Well, I forgot, I want to go light over the whole thing first. He sort of revives the whole town by doing his ceramics, and he's taking like old pottery and making it new again, and really starts a big deal in this town with his ceramics. They have tourists coming, and you know, they were just living a wonderful life there. And Francoise had 2 children with Picasso, and that's Paloma Picasso, who a lot of people have heard of because she was a designer, and she has that perfume, or had that perfume called Paloma. But her and a son, and his son actually worked as his chauffeur for years. But as was bound to happen, they got tired of each other, and he started hanging out with this 19-year-old. He was, I think, 73 at this point. Starts hanging out with this 19-year-old model, and they say that this relationship with the model was not really a you know, like a love sexual relationship. It was just she modeled for him, and they became really good friends, and they were just really close. Who knows? But he breaks up with Francoise, and then he ends up meeting a woman named can't think of her name because I didn't take down notes. But he meets another woman who's much younger than him, but not 19. She's a little older than 19. And they fall in love, and I think that that's the woman that he lived with for the rest of his life. And of course, he started painting her. And they say towards the end of his life, he started, he said he was like cannibalizing the work of other renowned artists, like, you know, the greats, the old greats, the masters. And he would take their work, and Picasso eyes it. He would paint it, but yet in his style. And that became like a popular thing at that time, him taking other people's work and doing it the way, you know, so that it looked like a Picasso. So that's kind of different and interesting. But they say that he was like a really fun guy to be around. You know, always, you know, jovial, joking, lighthearted, and evidently, you know, very, very kind. And I never knew this, but he came up with that whole, the dove as the sign for peace. He had painted that dove, and then it became like an emblem for peace. I did not know that. You know, they always show that white dove. That's sort of like a, you know, an indication of peace and love. Well, that was him. That's pretty cool. I love these pencils. They like feel so creamy yet not all waxy, you know, like an oil pastel or crayon or something. But they're just not dry like a regular colored pencil. And they're very pigmented, unlike, you know, like watercolor pencils. So I don't even know if I should be doing all of my, like all of one chicken in the same sort of, you know, brownish reddish shades. But I think that's what I'm gonna do. Whoops, I keep forgetting to go light first. After I do this one, I'll try some blue and sort of work in the background, and then I'll turn off the camera so that I don't bore the crap out of you guys. I did something that was fun and interesting last week. A very nice woman contacted me through my Etsy shop, and she had seen the like whimsical girl paintings that I do, and she asked if I could do like whimsical portraits of her daughters. And so I said, sure, of course I can. And so she sent me pictures of her beautiful little daughters, and then I let myself get into a little panic for a couple days because all of a sudden it was like I forgot how to paint. I couldn't figure out how I really wanted to do them. And then I realized, you know, do them like you would do your other whimsical paintings, Cyndi. That's crazy. And just take their features. So after I got over that little trauma that lasted, you know, a day or two, I did them, and I was very happy with the way they turned out, and she appears to be very happy with the way they turned out. So that was like a really, really good experience, and I want to do more. So if you know anyone that, oh, I thought I was going to do blue next. Okay, I'll do this one, then I'll do blue. If you know anyone that would like whimsical paintings of their children, or, you know, certainly I could do adults too, I feel, though, at this time I could only do females. I've never done a whimsical man. I don't know if boys or men would want whimsical paintings of themselves, but anyway. Anyway, if you have any interest in that, contact me, because I would love to do some more. Of course, I'm probably talking to all artists right now. If you're watching this, you are probably an artist. So you can probably do a whimsical portrait yourself if you wanted to. But just in case you don't do, you know, whimsical portraits. Just putting it out there. Okay, let's move over to the blue and do something blue up here and see how it looks, and that's gonna probably help me to figure out what colors I want to use. Violet, I've got a million violets. Where's my indigo blue? I love that color. Grape, blue marine, no, indigo blue. Here we go, indigo blue. It's broken at the top. Oh well, we'll use it anyway. Let's do it. Let me just put it in this space right now. This is kind of a dark blue, so I want to go really light with it. And I think the more I get going with this, the more dimensional I'll be able to make it look. I'll figure it out where, after I've, you know, colored in more spaces, I'll figure out where I need to shade them, highlight them. I can always add white on top to highlight them. And with these pencils, you can mix the colors. So, you know, I think I'll figure it out as I go along. It'll be interesting to see if after it's all colored in, if we can still tell that there are chickens on here. I want you to be able to see that there are chickens, but I don't really want it to stand out. Hey, it's a bunch of chickens. I'd like to try to end up right in the middle, you know? Like looking at it, oh, that's cool. Ooh, there's a chicken. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. Go to look a little more dimensional. All right, so I'll just keep going, and maybe I'll check back in with you when I'm about halfway through, in case there's anything that I've noticed in doing this that I need to tell you, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so I'll be back. Okay, I'm checking in, and I don't think I'm halfway yet, but maybe a third of the way. This takes a little time, and the more I do, the more excited I'm getting about seeing what it's going to look like in the end. And figuring out anything else that I can do to make it look more cubesque. Is that a word? Cubesque? Anyway, so I'm going to continue coloring here. Coloring and then shading. And I'll be back. See what I come up with. Okay, I have it all colored in, and actually I'm pretty pleased. I'm not finished, but I'm pretty pleased so far. You can see the chickens, but they are, you know, cubey, geometric. I want to work a little bit on my shading, but I'm going to do that as I sort of burnish these things. Now this took a long time to do. I ended up doing it while I was watching TV last night because it took quite a while, actually. But if you will notice, I don't know if you can see this, but okay, I have these three things. I have a white Prismacolor pencil, which is what I usually use to go over my colored pencil drawings when I'm finished, because it makes it look smoother and more, you know, almost like paint. But I also have this Derwent blender and a Derwent burnisher, which this I had never used before, but I figured I'd try all three of these. Now, I did 3 little sections, and I hope you can see this. Okay, this one, this little area right here, I went over with the white pencil. And I'm happy with the way that looks. It looks, you know, fairly smooth. I just went over it pretty quickly, but, you know, it smoothed it out a lot. You can see the difference between that and that, or that and that. It smooths it out. Now, this one, I went over with the burnisher. And it did a pretty good job too. There's just something about it. It doesn't feel quite as nice while you're doing it. I don't know, maybe I'm a tactile person, but it didn't feel as smooth while I was going over it. But, you know, it looks good. And this one I did with the blender. Now, the darker parts turned out really nice, and they look like paint. These lighter parts, you can still, I don't know if this is getting blurry, but you can still, you know, see it's not as smooth, but it's textury, which looks nice, and it's textury, new word, without looking like so much like it's a colored pencil. I could probably go over this more, well, and smooth it out more. Yeah, you know, I mean, the more you go over it, the more it smooths it out. So I could spend a tremendous amount of time on this and go over each one. However, the white pencil, I think, smooths them out a lot quicker. And you can really go in long strokes with the white pencil, whereas the other two, you have to make it look good, you have to just sort of do it in little circles. The white one, look at that. I mean, you can smooth it out pretty quickly. That looks pretty good. But as I was looking at this, I think before I go over and, you know, smooth out the whole thing, I want to add some more squares. Now, you saw how I did this. I put the chickens down, and then I just did straight lines that went all the way across the page. But I was looking at Picasso's cubist paintings last night, and I think I need to add more. I like to go in some of these larger areas, like add smaller rectangles or squares in those, or go like there, go over it. And then sort of, and then use the same colors to color them in. Not different colors, the same colors, just slightly different shade. But, you know, do that in some places. Put in some smaller blocks. So I'm going to look for, because right now all I have is this big, big ruler. I'm going to look for my smaller ruler or some kind of smaller straight edge and add a few of those, because I think I would like that. Of course, I'll add one, see if I like it before I just go drawing lines everywhere. So let me find a straight edge, and I'll be right back. Okay, of course I couldn't find my ruler, so I'm just using this little piece of watercolor paper. You just can't find anything for a straight edge when you're looking for it. Let's see. Okay, I drew a little rectangle right here off camera. Just try it. And let's do something here. I'm just eyeballing this. Since I don't have a ruler, but hopefully it'll look straight. Ooh, I found out another thing about Picasso that I liked. After I think last time I was talking about his life, he was with that Francois woman. They'd moved to the south of France. And they were living, you know, a beautiful, austere life there. And he's creating art. Well, obviously, or of course, they broke up. And then he met this other woman, and they were together, I think, until he died. But I'm pretty sure they're the ones who rescued an owl, and they raised an owl, which I really like because I have an owl. I don't really have an owl. I have an owl that lives in my soffit, and she's been there for and you all have probably heard me talk about this before. She's been there for about 4 years. Maybe 5. She's been there a while, and she had babies once. Maybe more than once, but I only saw the babies one time. She had 3 gorgeous little babies. Oh my God. They were adorable. And the way my art room is set up, I have a balcony like straight ahead of me that goes like the length of our house. And you know, there's sort of a roof over it and then a soffit, and usually there's, you know, there's a ridge vent, and most normal people have a screen in their ridge vent so the animals don't get up in there. I don't know what happened to that screen. I moved here 30 years ago and that screen was gone. I don't know. My husband built the house, maybe never put a screen in. But anyway, so we've had squirrels. For a long time I had squirrels living up there. But then about 4 or 5 years ago, the owl moved in, which put an end to the squirrels, of course, because owls like to eat squirrels. But it's hard for me to talk while I'm doing this. Hope it's not too irritating for you. But, so when I walk out my door, she's up there directly across from, you know, my sliding glass door here, up, I guess I would estimate it's like 3 feet above my head. I look up, and there's my owl's face. And she's there pretty much every day. You know, some days I don't see her, and I don't know if it's because she's not there or she's just backed up further because she doesn't feel like, I don't know, getting fresh air while she's sleeping. I don't know. But I can look up and see her. So when she had the babies, I walked out there, I looked up for my owl, and I saw 2 tiny, tiny little owl faces looking down at me with these big eyes, just like she usually does, but they look like little kittens. And then I walked down a little further, and there was another little one, and they were doing just exactly what she does, sitting up there sleeping during the day with her face, you know, sticking out through the ridge vent. And they were just beautiful, but, you know, they left, I guess, went to live their own lives, but she stayed here. She's always here. I was talking about her on Facebook the other day, how, you know, owls will eat chickens. They are predators, and I have seen her with animals before. I saw her with a snake one day. She flew right over my head with a snake, And I'm just praying, don't take it into the ridge vent. Please don't take it inside my house. And she didn't. She flew someplace else with it. But I let my chickens out. Well, of course, now I only have one chicken. My other chicken died a few weeks ago. And she's never bothered them. And she sits up there every day and watches the chicken out there eating in the afternoons. Because I'll look up and her eyes are open. And I sort of remind her every day, don't even think about it. Don't think about coming down and screwing with my chickens. So I think that's pretty amazing. She's never fallen victim to her natural instinct because, you know, here she has food right in her yard, just feet away from her, and she does not go after it. Of course, I read that owls usually catch their food at night. So maybe she's just not hungry during the day, and that's why she doesn't do it. I like to think that it's because she has respect for her home and knows that, you know, those are pets too, and knows that I hang out with them and is just acting respectfully. But who knows? Okay. So I did those. So I'll go over these with the pen and then shade those in. I'm going to use the same colors. And, well, I might come back and shade a couple of these in on camera. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay. As you can see, I did a few of them. I'll go ahead and color this one on the camera. I didn't want to bore you by doing a lot of them on camera because you probably get the gist of this. Basically, it's just coloring them in and then shading around them. And it's just, you know, changing the pressure on your colored pencil. You lighten up the pressure, it's lighter. So you start dark and then just get softer and softer as you're going out. Like that. Let's see. A lot of these I can't really tell what colored pencil I used. So I'm just winging it. Just winging it. I'll sort of blend these in where they meet. So it kind of looks like the same shadow. I'm starting to mumble, aren't I? But like that. Okay. And then my next step is going to be to burnish these or go over them with the blending pencil or the white pencil and just sort of smooth them out. And there are some places where I want to darken up the shading to make it look a little more interesting, especially right near the edges, because I want to try to make it look, you know, kind of dimensional, like some are behind others. Although it would have been easier to do that if I had used colors that were more similar. I noticed that in a lot of his, especially the ones that he did in the beginning, he would use a lot of earth tones, sort of stick to, you know, browns and dark brown and beiges and maybe a little you know, rust color. And that made it, you know, a lot easier to make it look, you know, more dimensional. And the ones that he did in the beginning, the other guy that is considered the co-founder of Cubism, George Brock, I mean, they have paintings that look, I mean, you'd have to be really an expert to be able to, if they weren't signed, tell who did what, especially some of the brown ones. They look, you know, just very similar. Of course, they, you know, they work together a lot, and back then, it's the same as it is today. You know, somebody comes up with something, and then everybody wants to do it. You guys know, especially like, you know, in the mixed media world, somebody comes up with a new technique, and then you start seeing everybody do it. And I guess that's how, you know, why people get into the discussions and arguments about, you know, the copying. You know, oh, she's copying me, or he's copying me, or I invented that, no, I invented that. But, you know, my phone just rang. Usually, you know, everything that we do, most of it, we learned from someone else. And, you know, it becomes even more difficult when you get to a point where you want to sell your art, and you have to really look at it and think, you know, is this, you know, original enough to feel comfortable selling, or does it look like somebody else's? Is it just too much like someone else's? You know, I thought a lot about that in the beginning because I was learning everything that I knew from the internet. So especially with, you know, doing faces. And learning how to do faces, I was, you know, copying other people. I mean, now I feel like my faces are different enough. I mean, I still see shades of other artists in them, but I've tried to make a point to, you know, make them different, change them. But I don't want to get on that whole subject. But the point that I was making is that, you know, they sort of did the same thing back then. I know, I think I mentioned when I did the Jackson Pollock one. You know, Jackson Pollock started throwing paint around and dripping and stuff. And then you look at a lot of the paintings that his wife did. She was also an artist, and I can't think of her name right now. It starts with a K. But a lot of her paintings look like his. Or they don't look, you know, like his, but, you know, she was using the similar techniques, and a lot of people did that at that time. They all started, you know, dripping paint. Let's see. More purpley one. Violet. I'm dropping things everywhere. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and, because I see what's happening, I'm doing a lot more shading now, so this is going to take a while, I can tell, but as I'm doing that, I'm also going to take my my white pencil or my blending pencil and blend these out so that they look more smooth, and I might leave some that are more textured like that. But I'll keep working on it, and I'll be back, see what I come up with. Okay, I think I am pretty much finished. I may, you know, piddle around with it here and there, darken up some shading, but for the most part, this is my cubist Picasso inspired piece for this month. And so it's good. I enjoyed it, and I think I'm going to try some other ones because I'd like to try a face. I think that would be fun, and I think that it would even be this technique would even make some cute cards. You know, you could do little cubist pieces and then reduce them and put them on cards, or make them really small. Of course, with my eyesight, I do better when I do things larger and then reduce them. Anyway, that's it. That's it for August, Inspiration with the Grapes. Next month we are doing, I don't know who we're doing next month, but I'll put it down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and peace.